Today I'm speaking with Shahzad Khan, who is the president and CTO of a company called Gnowit. This tool is freaking phenomenal. Basically, it provides an intelligent research. It goes out there, it finds information from the web, from emails, from social media on a specific topic of interest to you. It pulls the information and summarizes it. It's got semantic analysis. Think of it as Google Alerts on steroids, but it goes a lot deeper. It clears out all the noise in between the articles, the duplicates. Large organizations are using it, individuals are using it, governments are using it. This is a great tool. In fact, I'm signing up. As soon as I'm finished this video, I'm getting my own version. There's a free version out there. Today's conversation really gets into the nitty-gritty of artificial intelligence and how it actually helps drive efficiencies within your business, and certainly from a marketing perspective, how it drives those efficiencies. If you're a marketer, you're going to love this. Shahzad, great to have you here today. Before we start talking about Gnowit and what you guys are doing, tell us a little bit about your background. I see you've studied at numerous institutions. You got a PhD. You've been the head of many organizations. So tell us a little bit about how you got into computer science, what you're doing, and sort of where you see the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on. So my career actually started out as an economist rather than a computer scientist. This was in '93. And I did about a year of economics, and then I realized that I enjoyed the maths. I enjoyed the fact that I could get patterns out that could potentially predict the future, but it was not going to happen in my lifetime. So at the same time, I was taking a couple of courses in computers because I had an interest in programming, and I realized that this is one of the last great crafts where you can actually do things with your hand and see the results almost instantly. As I went through the years, I did a master's in the US, I did a PhD in Cambridge in UK. I basically kept going back to the fact that, I can create prototypes that do a lot of the work that I would do myself. So the first program I ever built was something that would allow me to track my to-do list, because I was always forgetting to do stuff. I would lose this little piece of paper. And this ended up becoming essentially, the seed on which whatever I've been doing has been building up. So today what we have, company I've created, is a mechanism that will have a very advanced idea of what interests me and be able to pull in information from everywhere and to provide me data that I can use today to achieve my goals.
Gnowit, as I understand it, is basically a platform or a tool that provides a real-time intelligence for organizations. You basically extract information from the web, email lists, social media, and sort of feed that in sort of real time.
Anyone who's doing research has got three major problems that they have to deal with. The hardest one is probably finding the right information. So we have a software platform right now that is pulling in everything, like all news from around the world, anything in English at least right now. We pull in press releases, we pull in information from social media, we pull in information from Google Alerts and other third-party aggregators. So we are, on average, making about 3 billion web calls to get different data around the world every month. And every day, we essentially get about 1 million unique documents. This far outstrips the capability of any individual to pull information. But that's just one of the three problems that you have when you're working with marketing data. The second problem you have is you got to filter out. You got to pull out the information that makes sense to you. So there's three techniques for that, typically. One is that you do it by hand. And that is a really hard, onerous, difficult thing to do on a day-by-day basis. Because you keep coming across the same articles because of the whole echo chamber in the media. You read a lot of stuff that's just pure content and which doesn't actually have information. It's designed just to wrap around a couple of keywords and push out. And it takes time to go through all the sources. So an average person can probably go through maybe 40 or 50 sources a day. And that's not a very good use of anyone's time. The second way to do that is that you select certain sources and then you hook them up with services like Feedly or so on, and then you can just go through that and ignore everything else. And that means that you're losing a lot of the information out there, and you're just limited to whatever is in the mainstream sources, which tends to not be giving you the latest, most important breaking information, because it's usually heavily editorialized. And the third way you have is to use a service like Google Alerts, where you put in keywords and just pray you get something good, because you're going to get a ton of data. And most of the information that comes to you is frankly useless. It's exactly the same as the manual approach, which was approach one, except you've got so much more data to go through, and you get burnt out. You'll do this for a couple of days, and then you will say that this is not getting me anywhere. So with Gnowit, what we have actually done is we have taken the ability to pull in all the data and added a semantic layer on top, which will literally go in and read every document and make sense of it. And when you express that I'm looking for certain topics, it will use those documents where those topics match to create clusters of information. And the one that is the most relevant to you, it will surface those. So you end up having the advantage of the big pipe of data coming in, and the advantage of having a curated, editorialized set of sources, which you can effectively go through in a day. One of our clients, before we put in the semantic layer, they were getting every week about 80,000 unique documents that were relevant to the queries they were looking at. And that was just too much. I could see the guy's eyes open when he saw the dashboard the first time. With our new system, I mean, he won't have to go through more than 100 a day max. And he gets it presented to him, as you mentioned, with very good workflow, where everything is summarized and he can literally just skim through it.
So it summarizes as well?
Absolutely. So our summaries today are of three sorts. One is that we summarize based on the actual topic. So by that, I mean that if you have lots of documents that talk about the same event, we will collapse them into the most relevant one. So you don't get lots of duplicates. Even if these documents have slightly different language and they are edited, you can still identify them very accurately and collapse them. So,
I mean, the way I try and stay up to speed on artificial intelligence, specifically as I'm trying to learn more about the topic, I use Google Alerts. But to your point, I get lots of duplicate articles and different company or different news sources writing about the same thing, and again, it's still a very clunky way of doing it. I mean, it's significantly better than the old-fashioned way of doing it, but still, there's a lot of repetition in the Google Alert.
We've actually carried out an experiment recently where we have compared our data versus Google Alerts. And one of the things that we noticed was that there was not as much overlap between the two as I would expect. So because our sources are primarily, at least at the core level, highly curated, we know that these are all the best sources from around the world. We were getting about, let's say, like for the experiment we ran recently, I think we were getting twice as many results as Google Alerts, and there was only a 15% overlap between both of them. What this basically meant was that for people who want to get the most important information, Google Alerts is creating a lot of work for them, a lot of unnecessary stuff to wade through, because they're pulling in data like job postings. They're pulling in ads of Kijiji and Craigslist. They're pulling off forums from places which are not very authoritative. And all this stuff is being pushed to you because it contains a couple of keywords that you nominate are of interest to you. On the other side, with Gnowit, you're getting data from authoritative sources. I mean, we do cover a lot of the other stuff as well. The ones that are low quality are systematically excluded. So it saves you from the hassle of going through things that you're going to reject anyway.
I'm assuming this is great for social media.
So for social media, it's absolutely amazing because of two facts. One is when you're getting the data, you're pulling in information from all these other sources that are not necessarily in your feed. And second is that we actually pull in all the data that people on your field share out. So if someone pushes out a document, they're voting that this document is something important. I want you guys to read it. It's worth my time and your time. So we actually pull in all these documents and run it through the same analysis toolchain that we use for all the other sources that we process. And we still tag it specifically to your feed. So you're getting in real time data from people that you respect, who are authorities in their field, who may be putting out things for the first time ever on the web, and it appears in your mailbox before it would appear in any blog, before it would appear in any of the mainstream media. Third thing is that since our platform also provides a workflow, you can choose the articles that you want to push out. So the feed of data that you get, which is highly curated, you can select the ones that you want to push out, and you can editorialize the ones. You can add a paragraph if you like to create a custom newsletter. This literally takes a couple of minutes. And in one go, you can push it out to your website. You can push it out to Buffer or Sprout Social, Hootsuite, or other social media engagement platforms. And you can put as kind of like an input for email campaigns that you want to run. If you want to run an email once a week to your followers. And all this literally takes a couple of minutes. Without the Gnowit platform, you need to probably hire a separate person to manage each of these functions, which is why most people, even though they need to do this marketing for their corporate brand and for their personal brand, they never get around to it.
How does the AI, how is it applied to Gnowit? What does it basically do?
So in terms of AI, we have it in many different places on our platform. So when I look at our platform, there is three main areas where we've been putting a lot of effort. The first is in the curation. So we use AI for one of the things we do is automatically identify for a given website that we want to monitor. What are the articles? What do they look like? We have machine learning that will detect them automatically and will eliminate things like advertisements, obituaries, about us pages, and those other things which are not content which is fresh and new that's being added. Our system also has a mechanism by which we can carry out a partial crawl of a given site once in a while, and we'll identify all the places where the new articles will be linked off. Essentially, we reverse engineer the sitemap. And what that means is that we can monitor sites every couple of minutes without ever being banned, because we are not putting in undue burden on the sites that we are tracking. We have a kind of pattern analysis throughout, but if we find that when you get, for example, a document down, our system automatically induces the scraper for it. It identifies the section which contains the best text, removes the navigation, removes ads, removes unnecessary comments, links to other articles. So you end up having essentially the same text that the person, when they were authoring the article, they put into a Word document and they sent to their editor. We get that back. As we move on, we actually analyze the clean text. We generate the summaries. We find out what are the key concepts that are mentioned over there. And then we put all this into, with supporting metadata and metrics, into a big data warehouse that is live. And this is just the one of the process. Then we have other processes by which we get feedback from the customers if they prefer certain content over others. So the system learns to exclude things or promote certain types of information. And when it comes to the actual curation, we have a whole set of innovations around there. It's not one AI technology. It's just like, anytime we found a problem, we got sick of doing it by hand and we said, let's automate it. And we have all this abilities to do statistical and semantic stuff. So we've just baked it right into the DNA of the platform. So with the Gnowit, we can essentially allow you to keep in touch with not only the trends, the latest information that is coming out that everyone is talking about, but also things that are of interest but have not been discovered as yet. So you mentioned that you're interested in artificial intelligence, and that's one of the things that I track. I like tracking things to do with artificial intelligence or predictive analytics or machine learning. I try not to pick up stuff from Singularity because I get a lot of pseudo-religious stuff over there. So I exclude things from that. But I have a feed that every day gives me a couple of hundred articles, and I skim through it and I choose the ones that I want to read. And I probably know what's happening in the field faster than most people. What is interesting, though, is I had the same feed running 2 years ago, and I used to get about 35 articles a day. So the interest in AI has just exploded. I mean, the volume of results we're getting right now is easily 6 to 7 times what we'd get 2 years ago. I can see the trends right through our system.
Although AI has has sort of permeated many aspects of our life, which we're probably not even aware of. From a marketing perspective, it's not nearly as talked about or recognized as it should be. If we don't sort of move towards AI and adopting AI in certain aspects of our marketing businesses, we're going to have a pretty rough period. Almost like where I think traditional retail businesses find themselves unable to effectively compete with the Walmarts and the Amazons of the world. If marketing agencies don't do that now, they don't start adopting these technologies to either drive efficiencies throughout their processes, they're going to become very uncompetitive. In terms of sort of the trends, what do you see as sort of some of the defining trends, things that are happening now that marketers around the world need to be focusing on, or at least be aware of?
There is a couple of trends that are very complementary to AI. So one of them is, as you mentioned, the whole idea of automation and digital disruption. We did the calculation and compared to our system, if we had to have humans doing this work, we need a couple of buildings full of people running 24/7, all the time essentially. We need about 70,000 employees to process just the amount of data that we have coming in right now. This is something that, no organization is going to afford and no one really wants to do because it's tough and to some extent boring work going through a lot of stuff that you're not interested to find the ones that you are. So any organization that is not taking advantage of the capabilities which AI-based systems bring are going to have a serious efficiency problem. The second element is personalization. So one of the things that we are working on to improve our curation is that we want to allow the mailing lists and the websites that people visit that are powered by our technologies to show them exactly the data that they're interested in. So even though we have a lot of existing practices because of the fact that we can curate the most salient information, if you could also pull in data from what the customers are interested in, when they come to the website, it changes to show them the things that they have traditionally shown more interest to. You'll have a level of engagement which the customers, which is, probably you can't get unless you're working in the same place all the time because you know them and they trust you. And that's essentially what marketing is about. It's about getting people to trust you, to engage with you, to feel that you're giving them something valuable in a reliable manner at a decent cost. And once you have that relationship, that's going to enhance your brand incredibly.
So tell me, and this is it again, no pressure on this one. So in terms of predictions for the next 3 to 5 years, what do you see happening with sort of artificial intelligence and business?
So when I look at what's happening with AI, I mentioned the trend that there's a lot more people talking about it. So we're going through a certain type of hype wave. And because of all the excitement that's happening over here, people are talking about AI, but they don't really understand it. The spectator stands are full of people, and there are very few people on the field who are doing things. And a lot of people in the spectator stand don't get what AI is about. So I think in a couple of years, there'll be a couple of marquee offerings that people will see and they'll understand. They'll be like, okay, here is a personal agent for me. It's much more than Siri or Alexa or Google Assist or Google Home. And it basically does a lot of stuff that my phone does today, but which I need to interact. It proactively identifies stuff. But there's also going to be a lot of silent places where AI is creating value that people will not find, especially on the business side. So there are even today people who create information goods using spreadsheets and humans and essentially putting a lot of sweat into something that a machine could do if it's structured properly. Especially with all the data that people are throwing off. You have the information that when you go and buy stuff at the supermarket, your loyalty information is there. You have GPS information. You have websites you visit. All this big data, which I define as people's personal data that is created and left. Our systems can learn from it, the AI systems, in order to be able to make the right sort of recommendations and the right sort of decisions that we would do without thinking. For example, if I was going to be creating an appointment with someone that I'm going to be having a podcast, one way to do it is to have a whole email exchange back and forth. The way I think we do it in a couple of years, with our systems will just talk to each other. So like you and I would have the equivalent of our own personal secretaries who would understand what is important to us, what are our constraints, what's our kind of like intentions, and would be able to negotiate those type of things without us actually getting into it. So it'll become ubiquitous. I mean, anyone who doesn't get into this stuff today will have missed the boats, and they will benefit from the stuff that other people provide to them. And if you're in business, you're in the business of providing value, not of consuming. So it's something that we should all be very cognizant of.
For those businesses out there, they've never explored or they've never implemented any form of AI that they're aware of. What advice would you give a business that's looking to implement or at least use AI to augment their business as a first step?
Absolutely. So the first thing I like to do is identify where is it that they need to make decisions, especially the ones that involve either their clients or decisions about what sort of material to pull in and so on. So when they figure out where the decisions are made, they need to identify what is the data over there that is present. And if they have enough data available, whether it is ledgers or it's Excel sheets or emails, then you have something which can be mined. But you need to have someone who is an expert that can understand how to convert the data and the value that is desired into a machine that will, at the beginning, at least semi-automatically, do 80% of what you do by hand, do it automatically. So a good source of this type of capabilities are actually local universities. I find that academic partners are quite good, as long as you can kind of like get them away from the teaching and the writing of the papers. Just have a coffee with them, say that here is my issue and so on, and if nothing else, they'll give you advice on what works. And as a company, we've regularly, every week, I meet a couple of people who ask me exactly this question. I have this scenario. I want to use AI, and I tell them whether it is possible, because in some cases it's not, or if it is possible, what is the easiest way? And there are some companies that we have actually helped put on that path.
Shahzad, thank you very much. I mean, this is absolute gold. I love the tool Gnowit, as I mentioned. I'm shamelessly actually going to go and sign up afterwards so that I can actually pull information, start sort of getting more in depth in terms of the data that I do collect that's been sort of summarized and cleaned up. Because I mean, I've been using Google Alerts for now, but as I mentioned, I mean, it's got duplicates. And so I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you very much. And no doubt we will be speaking again. I mean, it's great to be speaking with Canadian companies. We look forward to hearing more about Gnowit, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you much, Justin. It was a pleasure to be on the podcast with you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts about something which I'm very passionate about. And I hope this will be of use to your audience.
Shahzad, that passion comes through. I love it. Thank you so much, and we'll chat soon.